Welcome to Revenue Rehab, your one-stop destination for collective solutions to the biggest challenges faced by marketing leaders today. Now head on over to the couch, make yourself comfortable, and get ready to change the way you approach revenue. Leading your recovery is modern marketer, author, speaker, and chief operating officer at Tegrita, Brandi Starr.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Revenue Rehab. I am your host, Brandi Starr, and we have another amazing episode for you today. I am joined by Jennifer Hopkins. Jennifer is the driving force behind the marketing strategy at Sonar. With 14 years as a B2B marketing executive, she's known for driving category-leading brands to unprecedented growth and helping founders successfully exit. With a knack for sales acquisition, Jennifer thrives in the intersection of art and analytics, constantly pushing the envelope to deliver campaigns that not only resonate, but also deliver tangible results. As CMO, Jennifer understands the value of building high-performance marketing teams and collaborating across the C-suite to propel growth. When not crafting the next big campaign, she can be found enjoying time with her family in her new role as mom or mentoring the next generation of marketing trailblazers. Jennifer, welcome to Revenue Rehab. Your session begins now.
Awesome. Hey, Brandi, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
I am doing great. Glad to have you on. Excited for our topic today. But before we jump into that, I like to break the ice with a little woo-saw moments that I call buzzword banishment. So what overused word would you like to get rid of forever?
I think this is great. I only wish there were word police where we take these words and they actually get banished. It's such a great icebreaker question. I was thinking about it, and the word I would banish is frothy. And I don't know if you've heard of this. It's popular, in the tech space and the investment space. And I've heard it a lot the past year and a half in regards to capital flowing around the marketplace. But for me, it's a little cringeworthy to me. It's just like too many people going to Starbucks and now they're pulling it into some of their business investment lingo. So frothy or froth in the business terms, I would X that one out.
Okay, I have not heard that one. I was going to say, what do you got against Starbucks? But now I see people have taken the coffee lingo into the business world, which sometimes it's kind of like, how did we get here? Like, who thought, who got a coffee and was like, you know what? This investment is frothy.
I know. I hadn't heard of it till a year and a half ago when I started here at Sonar, but it bothers me for some reason.
Okay, well, I can promise you that I will not use the term frothy in this conversation, and I'm not even a coffee drinker, so it's not a word that's in my day-to-day vernacular anyway. So we will banish that one. So now that we've gotten that off our chest, tell me what brings you to Revenue Rehab?
Yeah. I was thinking about some topics that hopefully I could contribute to your leaders, because you guys cover a lot of different topics here. And, no doubt a topic that's very popular in your podcast, it's in the name of your podcast, is driving revenue. So me personally, my opinion, and I think a lot of people would agree that if you're going to be driving revenue for an organization, you're not going to be successful doing it unless your sales and your marketing team have a really great relationship. And I'm hoping in the little bit of time that we have together, Brandi, maybe we can kind of peel back the layers there a little bit and talk specifically about how leaders across sales and marketing can drive a healthy competitive mindset in order to accelerate that pipeline velocity that they're working so hard to achieve.
I love it. I love a good, healthy competition just in general. And I do think it is an aspect. We talk so much about marketing and sales alignment, which is important, but that little bit of, collaboration and competitiveness, I do agree can be valuable. I believe in setting intentions. It gives us focus, gives us purpose, and most important, it gives our audience an understanding of what they should take away from our discussion. So I would say, what's your best hope for our talk today? What do you want people to really take away from the discussion?
My hope is that throughout our conversation, they can find some actionable pieces that they can take back and implement. Hopefully, I can give a few suggestions throughout the conversation today that they can maybe audit their current process and say, okay, what are we currently doing to have a really great relationship with sales? And are we missing a few things? If not, maybe I can take a few suggestions from Brandi and Jennifer today and maybe implement just one of those to see if we can improve the relationship between these two really important departments.
Perfect. So let's jump back to this healthy competition.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much, at least in my career, so much of the relationship between marketing and sales has been a lot of finger pointing, a little bit of a knockdown, drag out battle in some cases where there is this, who's best at what, who drives what. And so, that's why there has been this shift over the years of like, okay, how do we align? How do we be on the same page? How do we be collaborative? And so I'd love to hear your take on what sounds like the middle ground, which is we're not fighting and we are collaborating, but that there is a little bit of healthy competition there. So when
Yeah.
you say that, what do you mean by it?
Well, and I would even kind of back that up for just a second too, because when I was, thinking about our conversation today, it still kind of blows my mind, Brandi, that this is even a question to be had, right? Like it's 2024. There's so much innovation, especially in marketing with the technologies that we're using to help us get closer. And I paused and asked myself, and I was like, is this still an issue? And, I can answer it. And, you work across so many organizations and teams as well, too. Like, do you see this as an issue? Because I do. I mean, I could definitely sense that when I joined Sonar here a year and a half ago, there were some areas of improvement that could definitely happen between these two teams. So, I just wanted to tee it up of like, you would assume that this would be solved by now, but it's still something that happens today, surprisingly.
I agree. And, we work across a lot of different size organizations, generally mid-market to enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I'd say the larger the organization, the bigger the challenge,
You think?
because there tends to be so much more disconnect and silos that exist.
Mm-hmm. So, I think it's still a relevant topic for today. And, to answer the question that you asked me, like, how do you go about building this healthy relationship and competitive mindset? I jotted down like 4 things in my mind that's been successful in my career. I think the first thing is that you've got to have a marketing leader who's not afraid to put a number on their back. Um, when I come into organizations and I see sometimes, oh, these teams aren't getting along, it usually starts with the marketing leader was a little too skeptical to own a number. And I think that's a starting point that just starts a little bit of a divide in the two teams. So one, I think you've got to be able to own a number. And I think that starts this healthy kind of olive branch of building a relationship, building trust. Because what you said earlier, oftentimes these two teams don't trust each other, right? Like sales says, I'm not getting enough leads. I'm not getting enough qualified leads. Marketing says, I'm giving you leads, but you're just not working them hard enough. So I think building trust is really important. And I think to start, you've got to be able to own a number on the marketing side.
I think that is a great one. I know Helen Baptiste, who is, CMO that is, everybody kind of knows Helen, and I really look up to her. She always says, you got to be able to carry the bag. And, it is one of those things that is important, because if I think about early in my career where marketing did not own a revenue number, we had a bunch of fluffy numbers that we were accountable to. And it did create a bit of friction, because sales was like, look, if I don't hit a number, my job is on the line.
Yeah.
You don't have that same accountability, and therefore you don't have that same
Yeah.
input,
Skin
stake,
in the game.
all those like you don't have skin in the game, so
Mhm.
we need to be driving what needs to happen. And so
Mhm.
I agree wholeheartedly that
Mhm.
marketing has to carry a number. Um,
Mhm.
and so, what that number is always debatable, because, then you get into the influence, attribution, contribution,
Mhm.
all these sorts of things. But yeah, I definitely agree that that does build trust.
Yeah. And I think it leads into the second thing, which is I think both sales and marketing leaders, they've got to have their teams aligned on the same KPIs, the same targets that they're going after. And if you can, compensate both teams, on that same KPI or goal. So, for example, sometimes you'll see marketing teams being goaled on how many total leads can you bring to the table every month. Well, then you've got the sales team who's obviously working to hit their quota, which is closed won revenue. And what you'll find is these two teams focus on two different initiatives, which are just paddling in different directions. And I think you're finding more and more teams, putting the marketing departments more focused on qualified pipe that they're generating, or even closed won revenue generated by marketing. So getting closer to that number that they own. I think making sure that sales and marketing have similar goals and are compensated on those goals are really great as well.
And I want to dig into that a little bit more because I
Mhm.
agree with this as well. In our book, we talk about what gets measured gets done, and
Mhm.
compensation is the most clearest form of motivating measurement for
Mhm.
employees. And when I've talked to other CMOs and those that, VPs, those that head marketing, they buy into the concept of aligning goals and
Mhm.
compensating people based on those goal alignments. But some of
Mhm.
the pushback that I have heard is that fundamental shift in comp for marketing
Mhm.
is one of those things where it's like just nobody wants to tackle.
Really?
On the sales side, it's like
Yeah.
comp plans, reviewing those, like that just is kind of a normal part
Yeah.
of business. And
Mhm.
you don't see that so much on the marketing side. And so there is
Mhm.
a little bit of hesitation to really try to push for that. Have you
Mhm.
seen that? Any thoughts or advice there?
I have. I think marketing compensation is never going to be at the caliber of a sales compensation, right? Like to your point, nobody wants to really kind of open that Pandora's box and kind of make it that complex. But I have worked in organizations and led marketing teams where you can structure bonuses, right? And incentive agreements on top of their base plans to where it's still incentivizing the behavior. And it's not a complex structure by any means. You'll find some functions like demand gen that are a little bit closer, right? You could maybe build out their compensation package, a little bit more meticulously. But across your team, right? If you've got a like for us sometimes, what's our marketing qualified pipe goal that we're hitting this quarter? You can still align the team and figure out what that quarterly incentive, semi-annual, annual incentive could be on achieving that specific goal. So, I would say to some people who are considering this, phase one, phase two, find a really easy way to maybe introduce it, see if you can get buy-in from your marketing team, see if it is indeed kind of inspiring the behavior that you want, and then see if you've got to make it more complex or not. Sometimes, simple kind of gives go a long way.
I like that. Okay, so you got to carry the bag. We got to make sure that we are aligned on our KPIs and
Hmm.
ideally tying comp to that. What's your number three?
My number three is you've got to bring people into the fold. So you've got to, alongside your sales leadership, you've got to create a collaborative environment. Um, Oftentimes these teams that are siloed, they're not even meeting regularly, which again kind of just boggles my mind a little bit, because if you're not putting these two teams in the same room together, how are you ever going to anticipate collaboration? So you've got to be able to bring them together, let them weigh in and conversate on some important topics like who is our ICP. Let's get aligned on who that is, because that's the leads that I'm then driving for you. And if we can agree on that, then hopefully we're going to get more qualified leads, higher close rates, and we're going to be able to help you hit your quota. Messaging, again, something really great. Sales is on the front line, so marketing can learn a lot from how to refine some of the messaging and positioning, things like lead scoring, Brandi, even creating lead SLAs, things that bring the teams closer together. So get them in the same room frequently, figure out what kind of meeting cadence that is, create a Slack channel where people can throw out ideas real time outside of meetings. The other thing too that I think is important with increasing communication across these teams, Brandi, is getting the marketing team to start sitting in or listening to recorded sales calls. I do this with my teams, and it's so great to follow up with them after they sit down their first sales call. They're just like so impressed with what they learned. I think it helps them build empathy to the salesperson, because sales is actually a really tough job. But then it also gives marketers light bulbs that go off, right? Like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize this was a sticking point in the sales conversation. Maybe we can create some sales enablement that does this. Or, hey, I didn't even have an idea, but maybe this can be a campaign we could run. So again, getting the teams together, building this collaborative environment where they can actually talk and ideate and improve and optimize together.
I love that. And, that is, as a career marketer, I can remember, listening to sales calls for the first time. And
Eye-opening.
I can remember, and this was back before we had Gong and all these things where you were remote, where I was literally sitting at a desk
in the room
with this double headset plug-in thing, listening to this call. And I was feverishly scribbling notes because it was okay, we could get ahead of this objection in our marketing collateral. We could phrase this differently. We could capture this on our forms. There were and I mean, that was from 1 or 2 calls. I think I sat with this guy for 2 hours. So it wasn't even, this long time, but I had so many ideas. And I do think that it's so easy, especially since most of us have teams that are stretched thin and, we don't have enough resources. It's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day and to not make time for those sorts of things. And so going back to what you talked about getting marketing and sales to meet, I always like to, in these conversations, tackle some of the objections and pushback that I hear.
Yep.
And one of the challenges that I have seen, consistently come up is marketing will try to drive this initiative to get these collaboration meetings. And then sales will agree to it. And then when it comes time for it, nobody shows up. Oh, we had this, it's beginning of month, end of month, middle of month, we've got this thing, that thing. And it just is not, or they'll do it for a month or 2 or a quarter or 2, and then it just kind of fizzles. And so it almost feels one-sided and forced. Have you been able to overcome that or really get to where, both sides see the value?
I think that's a good question, right? Because sometimes there's meetings overload these days, especially in a remote world. And to your point, people can just kind of, fade into the background if they don't find a meeting valuable. I think that this is kind of like a top-down approach. Your marketing leader and your sales leader have to find a way to make sure that the team sees the value in these meetings. And they have to personally be on top of, hey, did you meet with this counterpart in sales? What do they think? And so I think there's got to be some management, right, of being able to kind of corral this initiative. But I think you said something really important. How do you get them to see the value? If I've ever wanted anything done with sales, I have to tell them the why. I have to tell sales why this benefits them, Brandi. And I think, in an example like this, if I'm talking to, a director or VP of sales of hey, you really should carve out 30 minutes for this meeting every month. And here's why. Because you're on the front line of sales. You want more qualified sales. And the best way for me and my team to make sure that you've got a qualified pipeline is to hear directly from you and your team on how this campaign is running. There's no better person to tell me what's working and what's not working than you. And I think if you can tie it back to this helps you win, this helps you hit your quota, these people will show up for the meetings.
Yeah, and that is great advice. And, something that we recently did, and, we are super small organization, but I do feel like it would scale, is we were having those meetings and consistently they were coming, but not necessarily feeling that the time was, the best use of their time. And so our CRO and I collaborated, and, he asked me, like, why do you want this call? Like, why is it important to you that this is an actual meeting? And through that conversation, and, I had to really pause and think about it, because the way we were doing the meeting before was the marketing team was presenting all the stats of like what campaigns were in market and what leads they drove, as well as what was in planning. And it was a lot of us talking with a bit of conversation at the end. And so through the conversation with the CRO, what we decided to do is marketing does all the slides, puts more detail into the slides, and sends them out in advance. And there's some clear, here's what we're going to talk about during the call, like what's in planning. It's brainstorming, input, the things you talked about, messaging, ICP, objections that they're hearing for things that are already in market. It's, what are you doing with the leads that have come from this? Are they good? Are they bad? And we've been doing that now just 3 months, but the 3 calls have been incredibly valuable. Good. Because now we're not presenting anything. Like they have all reviewed it in advance. They come in, they've digested it. They come in with ideas and questions.
That's good.
And, my 2 marketing managers, after the first one, they both messaged me like, wow, why haven't we been doing it this way in the past? This is what we've been needing. And so like, what you were saying made me think about that. Is also, how do you format that meeting? Because sometimes there are a lot of meetings that could have been an email. And so it's like, why is the time together valuable?
Yes. And, I think this kind of leads me into the fourth point of, you've got to share the data and you got to be transparent across both teams. And Brandi, when I think about like in my career, what are some of the most successful sales and marketing meetings that I've had? It's the real simple ones. I mean, it's the ones that oftentimes I will have weekly, and it might not be with the entire marketing team, right? And I'll start there. My most successful meetings have been when I'm meeting with myself, the CRO, the VP of sales, and my demand gen team. And weekly, we are popping open the dashboards. We're looking at how we're pacing across pipeline. Marketing's quickly presenting on how we're supporting them in their efforts to build that pipeline. And we have like a quick conversation on like, okay, this isn't performing well. Here's where I could use some help. Now, and I think the important thing is too, is your entire marketing team and your entire sales team doesn't have to be in a meeting all the time together. I'm a huge fan of don't put a meeting on my calendar if it could be an email. So I think it's finding the right meetings and putting the right people in the same room. Now, I'll also say, in order to get your marketing team to buy in, you've got to disseminate that information. So whether it's your head of marketing or your head of demand gen who's hearing those conversations, they've got to then bring it back to the team in the most immediate, next meeting with the marketing team and say, hey guys, here's where sales pacing, here's where we are at, here's where we need to adjust a little bit. So I think finding the right meeting, pulling in the right stakeholders, and talking about the numbers, which is important to salespeople, I think you'll find a lot of success if you look at it that way also.
I love it. And so, coming back to this competitive angle, where do you see the healthy competition come in here? Because we've talked, like a lot of the things we're talking about really is collaboration and alignment. Where do we see that healthy competition show up?
I think healthy competition, it starts with the first thing that I mentioned, right? Building trust. So you've got a marketing team, you've got a marketing leader who's putting a number on their back. And through small actions like that, Brandi, you're building trust and you're building a relationship. And I think with any relationship, whether it's at work or in your personal life, once you build that relationship, you've got a little bit more casualness to kind of like poke and make fun of and inspire. And I think the healthy competition, I smile because this is where I have fun with sales teams. I can say, hey, VP of sales, I noticed you haven't hit your outbound sets for this week. What's going on? Do you need some help from marketing? And kind of like that healthy banter, you would be surprised how fast a salesperson will spark up. And then that healthy competition kind of follows. Then they'll say, oh, well, if you were hiring more or bringing in more qualified leads. And then you just kind of see this spark arise between the two teams. So building the relationship, having a fun banter. And then I think that sparks some of the healthy competitiveness that naturally follows afterwards.
I think you just hit on something really, really key, because when there isn't that clear alignment, collaboration, healthy relationship, that
Mm-hmm.
competitiveness is where it becomes a battle and
Uh-huh.
friction. Where there
Mm-hmm.
is trust and that healthy relationship and that shared accountability, that is
Mm-hmm.
where it does then become a little bit of that, healthy nudging of like, "Oh, I
Uh-huh.
drove this much pipeline. What you gonna do
Yeah.
with it?"
Uh-huh.
And it then is like, you have those conversations in the sales meeting, like, "Look, we gotta crush these leads that came
Yeah.
in because marketing is talking trash about, how
Exactly.
good they are." And I do agree. Like, I think
Mhm.
that is like you've cracked the key nut there that takes that from friction to
Yes.
healthy competition is
Uh-huh.
all the work that you just talked about in creating that alignment and collaboration and trust.
Yeah, you won't be successful if you don't build a relationship. And I'll give you an example. I know we're running up on time, but like when I first started at Sonar, you could tell there was a little bit of friction between sales and marketing. And I was a new person coming in. They didn't trust me. They were like, "Oh, here's another marketing person. They're not going to be generating leads." And I said, "Hey guys, excited to be here. My background is around building and kind of spearheading the pipeline. I'm used to driving at least 60% of the pipeline, and I'm going to do that here for you guys. So you better buckle up and start doing your outbound sets because you got some competition in town." And the whole room just kind of set up, and we're like, "Oh wow, this is going to be fun." But when you talk like that, you've got to be able to back it up. And so, fortunately, I was able to rally the marketing team behind that same kind of mantra. And every week we were able to come to the sales team of, "Hey, here's where we're inching up pipeline." In Sonar, for example, I started and we were generating 4% of pipeline. A year later, we're generating 70 plus percent of pipeline. So
Wow.
there's that healthy banter, and you've got to be able to kind of back up some of the big talk that you've got. So, but building the relationship and kind of poking them a little bit and making them smile and letting them know that you're in it with them. I think that's the big thing.
Yeah, that is like a good relationship with sales like that, where you can kind of rile them up a little bit. Like, that is such a beautiful thing, and just
Uh-huh.
it makes it better for everyone to come to work,
Mhm.
because, then both teams are kind of really rallying behind that. The marketing team's like, "Oh, we talk trash. We got to make sure that we back it
Yeah,
up," and sales is like, "We're not gonna take that. We're gonna, close
exactly.
everything you throw at us."
Yeah,
And then in the end, everybody's having fun. That helps
yeah,
with retention of
revenue.
employees, and
Mhm,
then you're driving revenue. And like,
mhm.
that's really, like, I mean, it's clear why your
Yeah.
14-year career has been so successful, with that kind of mindset, because, that is the way that you build teams and grow companies.
My favorite people are sales, and I don't know a lot of marketing leaders that would say that, but I genuinely love working with salespeople because, if you go into it with the right mentality, you can have a lot of fun driving revenue.
Well, awesome. Talking about our challenges is just the first step, and nothing changes if nothing changes. And so,
Mhm.
in traditional therapy, the therapist will give the client some homework. But here at Revenue Rehab, we like to flip that on its head and ask you to give us some homework. And so, what I'd like to ask is, if we've got marketing leaders that are listening and they're like, "What Jennifer is saying sounds amazing, but we are not there." Um, where would you suggest they start? What is that one thing, that they can do to start to move the needle in the right direction?
I would say it's a lot of what I said earlier at the beginning of the call. Audit your current process. Like take 5 minutes and actually sit down and think, how am I currently collaborating with the sales team? And if you're doing all four of the things that we talked through today, awesome. High five. Keep doing it. If there's something that you haven't tried yet, my one homework would be pick one, try it out for 30, 60 days and see if it's helping. my guess is that it is going to help. And then if it does, move on to another one. And then over time, hopefully you've got all 4 checked off and you've got a really great relationship with your sales team.
I absolutely love it. Auditing process is my jam. And so that is a great place to start, because if you don't know where there are gaps or things that are not working, then it does, it can feel huge to tackle. And, having the 4 sort of key things is also really great. Well, Jennifer, I have thoroughly enjoyed this discussion. It's been insightful. But that's our time for today. But
thank you, Brandi.
Before we go, how can people stay connected with you?
Follow me on LinkedIn. You can find me under Jennifer Hopkins, or you can pop over to the Sonar website and find me on there as well too. But thank you again for having me, Brandi. Great conversation this afternoon.
Awesome. Yes, I have thoroughly enjoyed it. We will make sure to link to your LinkedIn as well as Sonar. So check the show notes wherever you are listening or watching this podcast. And if this conversation has resonated with you, I encourage you to go back to episode 38, where we talked a bit more about the marketing and sales divide and how to close that gap as well. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. I hope you have enjoyed my conversation with Jennifer. Can't believe we're at the end. Until next time.
You've been listening to Revenue Rehab with your host, Brandi Starr. Your session is now over, but the learning has just begun. Join our mailing list and catch up on all our shows at revenuerehab.live. We're also on Twitter and Instagram at Revenue Rehab. This concludes this week's session. We'll see you next week.